What's up, everybody? Hope everyone can hear and see me okay at the moment. Let me know if you can, and then we will get started real soon. Just having a look to see who's here. I said we'll start at 7 o'clock, but figured we might actually wait a little bit longer and see if more people join, and then we can immediately get started. What is up, Toupee King? I see a number of my usual commenters on here. Some of you have actually joined my live streams a couple of times from what I can tell. Got a few things we'll be covering today. Just doing a... There we go. Where are you checking in from? I always like to see where people are tuning in from. No, look, I do. This is only the fifth one I've done. Usually, I think the reason that you might not have seen me do them is because I tend to do them really early in the morning on Sundays. Generally around 9 to 10 o'clock. So generally, because my viewership is so spread out in the UK, Australia, the UK, parts of Europe, it just makes more sense that I do it in the morning rather than at night. But all right, cool. Thank you very much. Brisbane, excellent. I'm also in Queensland, so not too far away from me actually. Hello, Iden. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Iden from Israel. What's the time over there like at the moment? Hello, Kurt from South Australia. It's been a while since I have been to South Australia actually. Excellent. New Zealand, Malaysia. Wow, lots of countries here. Yeah, I would have never thought. I have been to Malaysia a few times. I actually quite like Malaysia. I haven't been recently, but I've heard of some. I've spoken to some ex-Muslims from Malaysia actually about um, how they issue their IDs so that you're essentially permanently locked into a religion. And even if you change it, which I think is impossible based on some data that I've seen in Malaysia, it's actually quite difficult for you to identify as anything but whatever's actually given to you on your ID. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I've been told by a number of ex-Muslims. Fatigued Queenslander. Goodness. Excellent. Someone from the US as well. Cool. Look, I feel like a lot of people are here at the moment, so oops, you can hear my dogs barking. So I think we can actually get started. Welcome everyone to the live stream. It's genuinely been a while since I've done one. I've actually said previously that I will try to do as many as I can, but unfortunately, life gets in the way, and I've been trying to do as many normal videos as possible. But I generally do really enjoy doing lives because I feel like it's a way to connect much better with people and just it feels much more engaging. And obviously, it's the new thing that's the new way of doing videos. But yeah, I'm very glad everyone's here and tuning in. Um, I guess one thing I would like to touch on is you might have noticed in some of my newer videos that I have actually started putting myself on there a little bit more, just doing a little bit of a new style, which once again I have actually said I would do, and then I kind of reverted back to what I was doing before. But I think that was all from my end. That was all about time efficiency. But what I realized is if I have myself on camera, even if it's just a regular normal video, I just find myself more engaged with viewers, even though it's uploaded later on. I just feel like I am actually, in fact, talking to an audience rather than me just talking to a mic. So that's always fun. The only bad thing is at this point of time, I am still not going to be taking this mask off, which is which has been the which has been relatively annoying to me, but that obviously most of you probably know why I've got to do it. Some questions here. John Green, have you ever considered doing a collab interview with Avi Yemini? Fun fact, I have actually met him some years ago. It was him and Sydney Watson. I don't know if you know who that is, a pretty big YouTuber. They held this event for people to just essentially, it was like a networking event for people who might not be woke left. And it was a really good event. I met quite a number of people, and that was my real first encounter with him. I did reach out some time ago to see if he would be up for a discussion, but I never heard back. And I think he now does stuff with Melbourne-based journalist Rukshan, who was pretty prominent in covering Melbourne when it was in lockdown. I sometimes listen to what they do. I did follow their coverage of the March for Australia a little bit because I think they were one of the few people doing it. So that was quite enjoyable. Acton. What do I think of Thomas Sewell? Well, for those of you who don't know who that is, he's the leader of the neo-Nazis in Australia, or the most prominent one. My opinion of him is not good. if I don't know if that's surprising. Probably not, because I've spoken about it pretty extensively on Twitter or X. My biggest issue is it seems like, so talking about things like immigration in Australia is already very difficult, as you know. Anything to do with it is always marked off as racism, or potentially even talking about how Australia is Australia as a nation itself, that concept itself is being thrown into question. Now, if you try to defend it, unfortunately, that conversation has been swayed quite significantly by that group. And if you've looked at new laws being passed in states like Victoria, especially ones that really stamp down on free speech, like anti-vilification laws, that came about as a direct result of Thomas Sewell. Now, Natasha, I understand a lot of people have said that they are probably hired by the government, but I don't actually think that's the case. I think it's more to do with when there are certain fringe groups that are not easily digestible or liked by the general population. Now, I think it's probably less than it's probably under 5% that would probably publicly support someone like him, or that group in general, in the Australian electorate. So I guess the government finds it very, very convenient that a group like that exists, because you cannot question their immigration policy, for example. It's all policy based, and yet you're absolutely not going to be able to question that anymore. See, the March for Australia, for example, how is that being reported? It's being reported as a Nazi adjacent march, when there was a lot of anger behind why something like that actually came about. And I believe in the video that I did about it, I really did try to sort of show people where it originated from and why it came about, and how it did get hijacked by that group. So that's my opinion of it primarily. But that protest is actually on part of the topics that I had planned for this evening. I thought maybe, as usual, we could actually start off with the United Kingdom. And I have actually put up this X post here. I think many of you might have heard of this news already. This is Graham Linehan. So, Graham was a few days ago. Graham was unfortunately arrested once he came back down from the United States, from Arizona, I believe, by 5 armed police officers. What was his crime? Not eating a succulent Chinese meal. His crime was that he posted a few jokes, actually. I don't know if you've seen them. I don't think it's a good idea for me to show them to you here, just based off what YouTube might do to this live stream. But Graham essentially posted a few jokes about gender ideology. Now, you've got to remember, I think a lot of people kind of gloss over this part. But before he posted these jokes in April 2025, which is this year, he was actually charged with harassment and criminal damage for essentially a confrontation with a trans activist by the name of Sophia Brooks at the Battle of Ideas conference. Obviously, he pleaded not guilty, and at the moment, the trial is ongoing, and you can see him here attending court just 2 days ago. But the problem was he then posted some jokes on X, one of which was about punching women in the balls. He's a comedian. If you've seen the IT Crowd and Father Ted, brilliant shows. He was just making jokes. And the second he landed back in the UK, he got arrested by 5 armed police officers. And that news obviously blew up. People like J.K. Rowling, and essentially it brought back where the conversation around the UK, essentially just having a facade of free speech. It doesn't really exist. It exists to protect, I guess, what is called acceptable speech, and acceptable speech can always change depending on who controls institutions, I guess. And I think this came about after, obviously, I believe you might have seen me speak about this in my last live stream, and I actually did a video about this as well, where Hamid Koskin, an ex-Muslim, got arrested and charged for burning the Quran outside the Turkish embassy. And that case essentially sort of solidified a new age blasphemy law in the United Kingdom. And the ironic part about even that case was the way the UK courts charged him was because somebody attacked him outside of the Turkish embassy. I believe that person actually stabbed him. The court then used that as evidence that this person incited hatred towards a protected group. In this case, it would be Muslims. But that is how they essentially have. Now it's case law, and it really did bring back blasphemy law in a way that I would have never thought I would see in the UK. Now you can see, like, one funny thing about Graham is obviously being a writer and not he's not someone who's that well known outside of the UK, but because he got arrested for this particular case, I think it sort of brought about this Streisand effect where everybody kind of knows about him now. I don't know if this is the sound's working. Yeah. I see him getting a standing ovation. Thing is, like, what did they achieve by doing this? They haven't really done anything apart from bring more attention to his cause. And it looks exactly like political prosecution to me, or persecution to me. And he actually put up something really funny just today. He's like, thanks to my solicitors and the Free Speech Union for getting my absurd bail conditions dropped. I believe immediately after he got arrested, he was actually not allowed to post on X, but now he's gotten a little bit of that back, which is pretty great, and he can obviously start cracking some newer jokes. But check this out. This was him in front of court.
This guy's well, I'm never gonna say it.
It is the Streisand effect. I haven't really spoken too much about the gender ideology issue on my channel, but because there are very significant risks doing so. But everybody now knows about his case. God. Yeah, and here's another interview by him.
Activists and left-wing lunatics like that, and they don't work for the people anymore. I met a nice policeman there, but they're isolated because the rest of the police force is just completely captured by gender ideology. So, yeah, I don't live here anymore because of that.
Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, it's one of those taboo subjects now everywhere in the Western Hemisphere, where this is I guess what is certainly obvious to your normal people, apart from institutional powers like academia or the media. It seems like there's a very significant push to ensure that this cannot be spoken about. I think it's another area that I believe right next to critique of religions like Islam is gender ideology. Like, there's not much conversation you can have about it. Especially, you'll essentially be walking a very fine line where, depending on what you say, there have been enough laws passed now where people can you're really in danger of getting arrested just like him. And I think if the government wants to make an example out of you, like Lucy Connolly in the UK, for example, they absolutely can. One interesting thing, however, is the police actually came out in the UK and said this has actually put them in a bit of a tough spot. Because, yes, people can make jokes, but remember how I said there was this joke about him saying if these people, say, invade women's sport, he was essentially saying, oh, you should probably go and punch them in the balls. They've once again used that as evidence of inciting hatred or violence. To me, it's very clear that it's a very normal joke. I've seen punch them in the balls in relation to the gender ideology made multiple times. It's similar to those jokes about, yeah, I'll call you she, but you've got prostate cancer. It's a joke like that. Unfortunately, they've used that to say he's inciting hatred towards a protected group, and then they arrested him. And in the UK, I've also noticed you actually don't need to do too much to get arrested, because all it takes is somebody to make a complaint and say you are inciting that, once again, that hatred or harassment towards a certain group. And it forces police to act because of the laws that have been enacted. So it's essentially, you could almost say free speech is at such a stage where people can actually almost, they're running targeted political campaigns against certain people. and you can no longer really speak up against these issues. But I want to bring that back into the broader issues around the loss of free speech in countries like the United Kingdom. I mean, I did a video about how they brought in digital age verification, for example, and that caused a lot of issues there, where you actually need to provide ID to even use something like Spotify, Xbox, PlayStation. And I believe there are certain websites that have actually gone ahead and they're trying to sue the British government now. And one of those websites actually includes Wikipedia. Now, what exactly is on Wikipedia that is not safe for, I don't know, people under 16 or whatever to read? Because Wikipedia is an encyclopedia. If you just buy a book of any bookshop, that, like when I was growing up, I used to have so many encyclopedias at home. Like, what is in there that is actually harmful? To me, it seems more like the government sort of wanted to age verify everybody. Now, obviously the UK has done this first, but I believe Australia will be kicking this off also in a few months. Maybe something like, I read the other day, something like 100 days left until they also kick it off. So even I'm unsure about how this can be done, because the second I want to use, say, a website like X, for example, they need my ID, or to use YouTube. And it's the government I'm giving ID to verify this effectively. So as a political commentator, they have suddenly uncovered who I am. Obviously, you can use VPNs, but at the end of the day, VPNs aren't as popular in the general public. It's not used by everybody. So they are pretty effective at essentially making sure they know exactly who you are when you share your opinion online. That's pretty dangerous. I feel like that's almost like what you would see out of a despotic, authoritarian government like North Korea, perhaps, where the government needs to know exactly what you say, exactly what you can write and read, and there can be no anonymous posting. And I think that's quite important on the internet, because that anonymity is what allows people to actually speak their mind. Because otherwise, what happens? You say the wrong thing about a religion like Islam, you say something, well, the unacceptable opinion about immigration, unacceptable opinions about gender ideology, you say whatever that may be, that might not even be really harmful. You're just offering a critique of it. What happens? The government knows exactly who you are. And in this case, if you weren't afforded that anonymity, what happens is your job might be at risk, and say you have a mortgage or whatever, you no longer feel like speaking, and suddenly that just effectively enforces silence throughout society. And I think that's what worries me the most. I do wonder how anonymous YouTubers or faceless YouTubers, viewers like yourselves, who I know a lot of people who watch my stuff, they're concerned about what's going on in their countries, and how governments are effectively ignoring their worries and concerns, because there's a bigger idea behind all of that, or bigger ideology driving all of that. Suddenly, if the government knows exactly who you are, do you feel as comfortable sharing those ideas or those comments, even, because they can now come after you, just like they came after Graham. And it's one of those issues that I guess ties back into what I also do, and perhaps probably one of the most concerning issues to me at the moment. And the UK, unfortunately, is at the forefront. Australia not far behind. The US is probably one of the last places that that will stand primarily because of the First Amendment, which is protected by a rather powerful Second Amendment. Welcome, Sebastião de Villa from Belgium. Oh, there was a video from Belgium the other day that went viral. I'll pull it up in a second. Yeah, so that was what I wanted to cover on Graham. Now, the other one I wanted to quickly cover off was I came across these Christopher Hitchens videos, and I'm assuming everyone knows who Christopher Hitchens is. He was part of the New Atheist movement back in the day. He was an English journalist, and he was extreme. So this was from around the early 2000s. Oh, sorry, around 2008, 2009s, when the New Atheist movement was really picking up. And as many of you might know, ironically enough, back then, it was much easier to criticize Islam in public, like Christopher Hitchens did back then, compared to now. Because I feel like post 9/11, there was a bit of a shift in attitudes, and people sort of saw Islam come out of that obscure spot where it was, and it became a bit more mainstream, and people started asking questions as to, hey, how can this religion drive so much extremism? What drives people to commit these attacks and whatnot? And I think this is where people like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and even Ian Hersey Ali, whose partner in Theo Van Gogh got killed because they made a movie that was critical of Islam. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but even I was quite young, but I think people like Christopher Hitchens was a pretty big driving factor behind my apostasy. Now, this video was from 2009, but he says something here that is, he's a prophet here. And I think, unfortunately, his warning here, people did not listen to, and that is exactly why we are in the place that we are at. And hey, Mort Rouge, welcome. One of my biggest followers here. Shout out to you. Thank you for all your support. All right, let's give it a listen, shall we?
This is very urgent business, ladies and gentlemen. I beseech you. Resist it while you still can, and before the right to complain is taken away from you, which will be the next thing. You will be told you can't complain because you're Islamophobic. The term is already being introduced into the culture as if it was an accusation of race hatred, for example, or bigotry, whereas it's only the objection to the preachings of a very extreme and absolutist religion. Watch out for these symptoms. They are not just symptoms of surrender, very often ecumenically offered to you by men of God in other robes, Christian and Jewish and smarmy ecumenical. These are the ones who hold open the gates for the barbarians. The barbarians never take a city till someone holds the gates open for them. And it's your own preachers who will do it for you, and your own multicultural authorities who will do it for you. Resist it while you can. And if you wonder what will happen if you don't, look and see how a cricket team in Middlesex in England had to change its name by force last week, because it was called, and had been for years, the Middlesex Crusaders. Look and see how stories about little pigs can't be taught to children in English schools anymore, lest offense be taken by the religion of peace. Resist it while you can.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? This was from 2009. It's insane to me that he was already warning people about what was coming. And unfortunately, we now live... Yeah, I agree, Stephen. It is pretty scary how spot on he was. Unfortunately, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think people did listen, because he is essentially warning people. He is saying, resist it now in 2009, let's just say almost 20 years ago, before your rights leave you forever. And unfortunately, they have. People did not resist. People did not listen to these warnings. And I think the primary reason for this was, obviously, the world was not as connected as it is now. even social media was essentially in its infancy. Facebook, I believe, came out in 2007. So perhaps people just did not, especially the younger generation growing up back then, did not understand how serious that threat was. And you can see here, he actually gives you a few examples around how a cricket team was told to remove the name Crusaders from their name, which they had used for forever, because that was already offensive in 2009. I mean, Crusaders is... half the time I feel like people don't associate that with any religious meaning, especially in the sphere of sports. Now, in terms of Islamophobia, that, I think, what he warned against has essentially come true today. And it was, as he is saying here, brought in by people preaching multiculturalism and acceptance and the fact and cultural relativism, which I harp on about all the time. I can probably go on forever about it, but that is how it was brought in. And prior to, I believe, the 1980s or 1990s, something like that, even the terms, and I am not Iranian, I am ethnic Maldivian, in case you didn't know. But I feel like a lot of people hear about this on on my live streams. But essentially, what Christopher Hitchens is saying, it came about because people just did not have that kind of understanding of what Islam would do once it gains a foothold. Obviously, it is not a bad thing, in my opinion, overall, for people to be able to practice their own religions and whatnot, and have the freedom to practice those religions, and also have the freedom to not practice those religions. Because I know, look, as an ex-Muslim and someone who knows quite a number of ex-Muslims, it is truly a luxury to have that choice. But unfortunately, when you bring about the whole multiculturalism bit, the whole thing about acceptance, whatever it may be, you always risk religions and cultures that don't have the same ideas coming through. And as I was saying before, the whole idea of Islam being a religion of peace, for example, weren't existing ideas maybe 30 or 40 years ago. That was all propaganda created in academic institutions in the Middle East, and obviously through leftists operating with those Islamists, the Red-Green Alliance, as you saw in my last video, in the West. I don't think in Islam's entire history prior to that, they've seen themselves as a religion of peace. Because Islam itself means submission. It doesn't mean peace. Like, it's not like Buddhism, for example, or, you can always go to a monk and they're meditating, and you can actually visually see, oh, these people, they're pretty spiritual. They're probably pretty harmless. I do remember George W. Bush actually saying something like that. Islam is peace. But I also think the reason he said that was because obviously he invaded Afghanistan and later Iraq on false promises, and this was 2001, and he was already trying to walk that fine line. And I don't actually know what the Muslim population might have been back then, but obviously they also have to collaborate with Islamic nations to actually go and invade Afghanistan and Iraq. I believe Pakistan was one of those countries where American troops actually moved their equipment through to Afghanistan. So if you don't say this, I mean, oh god, that is a terrible quality video. Let's try this one instead.
We thank the many Muslim nations who stand with us against terror.
There you go.
Nations that are often victims of terror themselves.
Because he's essentially a
This
statesman
also
here when he
sends a
says that.
message to all Americans. Our nation is waging a war on a radical network of terrorists, not on a religion, and not on a civilization. As we wage this war to defend our principles, we must live up to those principles ourselves.
Well, hold on. I gotta just pause it there. When was this? 2002. So he hadn't invaded Iraq yet, but he was going to do it. I'm not entirely sure I agree with some of the stuff that he's just said. I think this was obviously the turning point. Oh yeah, that was also a brilliant video. This was the turning point essentially, where I think this whole idea of, okay, we do realize Islam as a religion has a lot of problems, but we need to tread carefully because there is a very large population that we do have allies with, especially internationally. So we don't want to say too much about the religion itself. We'll add in words like radical, or the modern phrase is Islamism, which is essentially the political version of Islam. But I have got to ask, when has Islam never been political? I mean, it's a political ideology that has domination built in as a fundamental part of what it is. I mean, the word Islamist, truly, it doesn't make that much sense to me, because we're trying to pretend like we can separate Islam from political Islam. That's never been the case. I mean, when I was a child, it was never taught to us that way, because Islam in itself, that was what guarded governance. It guarded how you lived every day. It guarded relationships. It guarded how you talk to other people. It guarded everything. So in this case, yeah, I don't know how there's that disconnect. Once again, what I'm trying to say is, this is part of trying to essentially sanitize what the religion itself actually is. But going back to Christopher Hitchens' warning here, see, thank you for bringing up George W. Bush, but as you can see, even back then, after he had invaded Afghanistan, he's still trying to sanitize Islam, talking about how it's peaceful, when his own military would probably tell him that's not entirely true. I mean, many years later, obviously the Americans have left Afghanistan, but guess what? The Taliban are right back in, and it's like women's rights, Afghan women's rights in Afghanistan got rolled back by a good 30 or 40 years. It's probably, I believe, when I looked at the UN Gender Equality Index last, Afghanistan was doing so badly, they didn't even rank it last year. Or I believe it was this year. Whichever one. It was that bad. And I also believe the bottom 10, the vast majority of them were Islamic countries. I won't take off the mask. Maybe one day. That day will come though, but not today. But unfortunately, so if you go back to today, everything he's said has come true. And I can tell you a great example of just YouTube. And when I first started making videos about it, I genuinely did not know how bad it was to openly be able to speak up about. And I wasn't even talking about Muslims or Muslim countries. I was talking about the religion itself. But I very quickly learned that I had to tread a very fine line there as well, because even YouTube comes very hard at you if it thinks you're critiquing it a little bit too much. And I'm pretty sure a number of other people who are very Islam critical on YouTube would probably tell you the same. I mean, I've heard about people getting their channels suspended and whatever. Now, going beyond that, it is certainly very, very difficult to criticize Islam in public in the modern day. and you might know this immediately. When was the last time you heard a mainstream politician? I'm not talking about obscure politicians in Eastern Europe, or Israel or India, which they all have their problems with Islam historically, so they might talk about it. But think about the UK. Think about the ruling leaders in America, for example, or Australia, or Canada even. The last I heard, the Canadian Prime Minister was talking about how Canadian values are Islamic values. Bunch of bullshit right there, but that's what he said. And in Australia, I can assure you, I have never ever heard of a mainstream politician go up on a stage and say, oh, maybe some of these beliefs, not all of them, maybe you can pick and choose, child marriage or slavery, or wanting to ban dogs, for example. One of those ones, they're the easy ones that everybody could be like, oh yeah, maybe that's pretty bad. But no, they have never done that. And I think even Donald Trump, when he did criticize Islam, it wasn't entirely, he never, I don't believe he really went too hard at it. Perhaps he might have talked about it in the framing of illegal immigration, but apart from that, he's really no mainstream politicians really talk about it. Yes, look, Pauline Hanson did something that probably very few politicians have dared to do. Let me see if I can pull this up on X. If not, I'll see if it's on YouTube. Yeah, here's Pauline Hanson. But unfortunately, Pauline Hanson runs a minority party. She doesn't have that many people, actually. She doesn't have that much power. She's never been... she's never ruled Australia, essentially. So, I mean, and guess what? Her pulling off this stunt, unfortunately, just almost permanently put a mark on her as someone really racist. And you might have seen how Pauline Hanson and Fatima Payman went off at each other quite recently because... Oh, here we go. Oh, hold on. That's not it. Yeah.
Challenge anyone to tell me one thing that I've said that is racist. And here I begin. There's a few. There's so many we could be Hitchens, yeah, who have disease. That in this prestigious place where we're supposed to bring a unity, where we're supposed to have that freedom of expression, yes, but within boundaries and confinements of respect. I kept on giving you the benefit of the doubt, Senator Hanson, despite your repetitive attempts to be racist to anyone who does not look like you. You are a convicted
Senator Hanson, point of order.
Racist.
Is Senator Hanson?
Yeah. So that's what happens when you try to do it openly. And you might have heard somebody in the back saying, Senator Hanson, you are a convicted racist. Let me provide you some context around that. So there's another senator called Mehreen Faruqi. She's a Green senator. You hear her say a lot of silly shit all the time. She's a first-generation migrant from Pakistan. She probably speaks more about Pakistan and Pakistan than Australia itself. And I believe in one of those rants, Pauline Hanson responded by saying, look, if you don't like Australia, you can just go back to Pakistan. Or something, I'm paraphrasing there. And yeah, Pauline Hanson got sued by Mehreen for that. And yeah, that's essentially how she got convicted as a racist. Obviously, none of that is... Well, I guess I can't comment on legal matters here, but telling someone if they hate Australia so much to essentially question why, in that case, they are here, and to go back to what you believe to be a better place, I'm not entirely sure. I would classify that as racist. But that's the thing. As I said, going back to Christopher Hitchens' warning, nobody heeded that. It was a minority that did, and today things are very different. But I would like to play you another one. Obviously, this is right before he passed away, and I think this one's just as important.
Islam makes very large claims for itself. Very large claims indeed. It claims to be the last and final religion, the last and final revelation. When you see bumper stickers, everyone says you can't reduce major things to a bumper sticker. It's not my idea to have bumper stickers saying Islam is the solution. It's a well-known slogan actually of parties associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. They say Islam is the solution for everything. It takes care of all your life and the one to come. Sexuality, political economy, banking, diet, relations with other religions, everything. It's a total solution. What is creepy about the word total? I hope I don't have to tell an audience like this. It's the first 5 letters of the word totalitarian. It's absolute. It's absolute. It's all-inclusive. It's unanswerable. And oddly, for a religion that makes such large claims, notice another thing about Islam, it doesn't particularly like having these claims questioned or scrutinized. In other words, as there just as there is with all religions, an inverse relationship between the claims they make and the evidence they can produce for them. You must have noticed that. With Islam, a younger religion, and perhaps therefore more in its first flush, there's an extraordinarily strong willingness to say that any challenge to its absolutist claims is by definition profane. And profanity and blasphemy can be the antecedent of very severe punishment, and often are, for Muslims and for non-Muslims.
Correct. Yeah, as you can see, he was one of those few people who was brave enough in the face of people like Theo Van Gogh actually being killed for critique of Islam to say things like that, even back in the day. And I'm thinking about one thing he's said here,
The
which is
last
about
and final revelation. When you see bumper stickers, everyone says you.
yeah, that statement there, and I think a lot of people don't think about that too much, but it's a really great point. When you say your message is the last and final, that's a pretty bold claim that essentially brings about violence, because there's a finality behind that claim. And especially, it is a totalitarian ideology, once again, like he said. So any challenge to it will always be met with persecution and violence. There's no real way around that. And with him, once again, it was a warning that I guess that was sort of on its way out. Once George W. Bush, as you can see, started talking about how it's a religion of peace and how peaceful it is multiple times, and that was actually before he invaded Iraq, you can already see the propaganda machine had kickstarted, and unfortunately it's never stopped. It actually got a lot worse. Now, someone here actually, who was that? Someone here from Belgium. Just scrolling up to the comments. Yeah, look, Raven King, I think it's only now that people have slowly started to realize, wait a minute, perhaps this wasn't that great of a thing. Once and the way people have been exposed to it now is not through seeing it online or reading about it. Obviously, a lot has now changed, where you actually have to live side by side in these communities, and when that happens, you suddenly come face to face with what that religion is like. Now, recently in Sydney, a council actually stopped, I believe, one of its largest mosques from blasting the call to prayer 5 times a day. So, I mean, and that was stopped there. But conversely, in the United Kingdom, there are quite a number of mosques that actually do this. And what about the rights of non-Muslims who live in these countries who they have to hear this call to prayer 5 times a day, getting blasted through loudspeakers? And look, I've lived in countries where that was the case, and a lot of the time that first call to prayer comes very, very early in the morning, and if you're just trying to get a good night's sleep, that will get disrupted. So whose rights take precedence here? Is it the rights? Are these the rights of? Are religious rights of a minority group more important over the rights of everybody else, essentially, who want to be free from that religion being imposed on themselves through this call to prayer? One really funny argument used by lefties I've seen is, but it's actually quite beautiful, the call to prayer. What are you complaining about? Yeah, but you hear it 5 times a day. So if I played you some annoying song, I don't know, Sabrina Carpenter or someone 5 times a day on loudspeakers in front of your house, the same song, mind you, it doesn't change, I can assure you're going to get really sick of it. And the first the first time it gets played is at like 4:30 or 5 a.m. in the morning. I'm pretty sure after a while you're just going to throw a brick through my house for doing that. So yeah, I just think only now, once people started experiencing how their little communities changed because of said religion, that's when it became even more off-putting. Now, obviously, you go onto X or you go to Instagram, YouTube, and you see all these cities just change so significantly. You're like, wait a minute, is that Paris? Or wait a minute, is that the UK? Because the demographics and the culture behind a lot of towns have changed so significantly. It's hard to imagine to a lot of people, especially those who were born in these countries, as to how that came about. And it's going to be extremely difficult to change any of that, primarily because, well, the freedom of religion exists. And as I was saying before, when such freedoms do exist, it is easy for hostile ideas, hostile cultures, and hostile religions to actually utilize that to gain more power. And that's the paradox of tolerance, as said by Karl Popper. If you tolerate intolerance, eventually the intolerance will stamp out tolerance, and you'll be left with a society where the intolerant ideology is the dominant power and tolerance will be nowhere to be seen. Because someone mentioned this, that they were from Belgium, I'll find this video. It's quite funny. Let me see. It went viral the other day. Oh, here we go. I don't know if subtitles on it. Subtitles aren't on it. Maybe our Belgian friend could translate. But effective... Oh, here we go. That has subtitles.
Si on dérange tant que ça, si on ne veut même plus nous voir, je veux dire que la région compte 19 communes. Ben, si à Molenbeek, apparemment, c'est invivable, hein, changez de bord, quoi. Allez-y ailleurs. Dégagez.
Voici le discours.
Yeah. Funny enough, that's that's a Belgian politician saying, here's a little bit more context here. She's under fire for telling residents to leave if they do not like seeing the veil or the hijab in her neighborhood, which is 44% Muslim. it's pretty crazy though, isn't it? Like you take in an influx of Islamic immigrants, essentially change the entire demographic of a town or a city, and then suddenly you fall out of favor and you're the one being asked to leave. So all the businesses change to provide for halal requirements. Perhaps dogs aren't seen as too acceptable. All the bars shut down. You hear the call to prayer 5 times a day. You start seeing the niqab and the hijab. Well, to be honest, the niqab is way worse because it dehumanizes women, in my opinion, and it effectively sends women's rights. It sets women's rights back like a good 500 years, and you start seeing these things, and yet, guess what? You're not allowed to complain about it. In fact, as this lady here is saying, if you don't want to see any of that, if you don't want to, if you want to complain about it, you can leave. Am I crazy, or who says that so publicly? But we're at a point where people like this are so confident in being able to say this. And yeah, the Raven King, you are correct. Not all cultures are in fact equal. This is cultural relativism. It's absolutely nonsense. Yeah, I hope you could say nah, you and they can do that. But here's the thing. Like if say in my neighborhood, if this happened, unfortunately there's not much I can do about it. And I think a lot of these towns in Europe, in Australia, in the UK is probably the prime example here, where entire towns and cities have essentially just changed so much. And in that case, guess what? It's the remaining working class that are driven out of these neighborhoods because the culture changes so much, so significantly, where another dominant culture takes over. And once again, if you don't like it, you leave. And that's become the standard. And you have to blame policymakers for this, because there is something called sustainable immigration, and by that I don't mean just numbers. I'm talking about the ability to actually assimilate and the ability to actually to bring about a culture that is actually compatible with Western civilization. Now, I mean, I did a video perhaps maybe last week where I essentially did a video where it lays out what Western values are versus what Islamic values are, and compared them to, obviously a lot of people do know that they aren't compatible, but it was more side by side, so that you could see why they aren't actually compatible. And that's really it. Like, do you really want to live in a neighborhood where all the women are dressed in the niqab? Do you really want to live in a neighborhood where all the takeaway shops, for example, or any restaurants that you go to, all the meat that's being served it's all been slaughtered in a way that causes immense suffering to the farm animals? No, not really. In fact, not at all. And it should be unacceptable to do so. In fact, I would argue for the opposite, where isn't it people like this politician here, Saliha Rais, who should adapt and assimilate into Belgian culture, for example? Why isn't that the case? Why isn't that the expectation? Genuinely. Like, I think the left-wing elite class that perhaps are in power in a lot of these Western countries, especially academia, they simply refuse to see it the other way, where if you bring in a large number of people from essentially cultures that aren't that great, they aren't expected to assimilate into the dominant culture that did evolve to protect women's rights and eliminate things like slavery and child marriage. But nope, not at all. We have to shame normal people into thinking they are the crazy ones, and if they don't like it, they can move out of these neighborhoods. And she's not actually the only one. I have actually seen a video from Finland where someone says, yeah, this is actually pretty funny. God, this woman says,
diversity here. It's just Finns and Finns and Finns, and everywhere you look, they're just Finns. So it's a bit difficult to blend in here. But I think that's something that is solvable in the near future because more and more immigrants are coming here, and it's...
Yeah, that's, again, the same thing. You move to Finland for a better life. I mean, Australia is a great example. Oh, Tranquil Vortex. Guess what? All the meat, I believe the majority of meat in Australia is already halal. The way it works is, because Australia exports, it has a great meat industry, by the way, because it exports a lot. And a lot of that is, I believe, goes to Muslim countries like Indonesia. By default, they effectively moved everything to be halal. So it's all halal. You don't actually even know that you are eating halal food or halal meat. If I had the choice, I wouldn't, because I do not want to eat any meat where unnecessary suffering was caused to these animals during slaughter. Obviously, there are, when it comes to factory farming, it's not perfect. There's a lot of issues around that, but at the same time, there's also the whole idea of you can stun these animals and then slaughter them normally. You don't have to, even if you stun them and you're still slaughtering them in the halal way, which is to slow bleed them. I don't. Where's the empathy there? As there's none actually. You're only allowed to eat meat essentially, and I don't know why they, back in those days, I mean, a lot of Islam is pagan, if you didn't know already, but maybe they had a reason to do so. But in the modern world, unfortunately, once again, this has been imposed on all of us by stealth. I didn't have a choice. No Australians had a choice. It was just, it just became the standard. And I bet you a lot of people actually don't know that is in fact the case. Yeah. And going back to this video, yeah, so why exactly is she so angry about Finnish people in Finland? Once again, like, this drives me insane. Like, it saying stuff like this makes you think that you are in fact a crazy one. But you went to a different country, I'm assuming, for a better life. You have to try and adapt to that culture. Number one, I don't see a lot of adapting here, based on how she's dressed. But you went there for a better life. It is the imperative is entirely on you to adapt, because obviously, if you're in Finland, everybody you're going to see is going to be Finnish. Who else are you going to see? Maybe there are a few other ethnicities. Maybe there are some tourists, but how can you have this expectation? And I don't know if you remember me saying very early on when the stream started, there's this whole idea of people, especially the establishment, almost trying to bring about this idea where they pretend like they don't understand what a nation is, or what makes up nationhood, or how cultures are formed. But these things are, I believe, almost every study, essentially, the middle class, the working class, they actually value these things quite a bit. But in this case, if you strip that away, then whatever this woman is trying to say actually makes a lot of sense. If you get where I'm going, so I believe it's it's not hyperbole for me to say this, is it? When it's right before our eyes, it's almost like a globalist agenda where if you strip away the whole idea of a nation state, then whatever is left is essentially an economic zone where anybody and everybody can come in, and your unique culture and your unique language, maybe you even have a unique religion, none of that matters anymore. You can go to a certain area of land and then be like, there's too many English people in England or too many Finns in Finland, and suddenly that isn't that controversial because it's just a piece of land, an economic zone where everybody and anybody can come in, work, live, do whatever they want, impose their own culture. What's the problem? And that's where this thinking comes from. And she's talking about, hopefully more immigrants can come in, so things are going to change, and I can completely forget about assimilating into this culture and go back to essentially living however I lived back. I don't know where she's originally from, but wherever she came from, I can't quite say, probably Middle Eastern. But that's exactly what she's saying, and it makes no sense. But she's so angry. And yeah, Maud, I do agree with you. A lot of it does have to do with the United Nations, and a lot of it does have to do with, I guess, the left-wing ideas around globalism and nationhood and nationalism, essentially. I was actually reading something the other day about Zohran Mamdani. Obviously, I believe you all know who that is. His dad is actually extremely anti nation states. So he believes it's essentially, it brings about a lot of suffering for humanity, the mere idea of having a nation. But ironically, yeah, he's anti nation state for everybody else, especially Western nations, but he's extremely nationalist towards the state of Palestine. And you can see this irony with a lot of these people. They're extremely against the idea of a nation state, nationhood, whatever, or patriotism. Guess what? Like that's a dirty word these days. But they sure do love nationalism towards Palestine, a state that doesn't really even exist. They really want that. I don't know how they're going to achieve that or how they're going to define that, but yeah, they all seem to want that. So that's once again where the hypocrisy is. And obviously, if the left, like Mamdani's dad, had any standards, they would have no standards at all. To be honest, yeah, he is a con man. The main issues around him is he's essentially he's very left wing. He's probably not religious at all, but he needs to send this idea to the general populace, especially the left wing ones. Hey, look at how ethnic I am. You know that video with him eating with his hands and that. I don't believe for a second he does that at home, because he comes from the elite 1% class, and yeah, he's just essentially cosplaying as the working class and adding in bits of religion to appease a population of the left that is looking for something unique, something new, something that they can get behind. Tupe King. I have not collaborated with Mr. and Mrs. Friendly Ex-Muslim. I have spoken to Mr. Friendly Ex-Muslim a few weeks ago. Hopefully in the future we can collaborate. The only ex-Muslim YouTuber that I have collaborated with is Infidel Noodle. that was some time ago actually. Perhaps we can do another one soon, but that's for now. Yeah, that's probably the only one that I have done so far. Let me have a quick look through your comments and see if there's any that I've missed. Let's see. Yep, Raven King, agree again. Move to a completely different country for a better life, and yet it is the country that they moved to for a better life that is the problem, not the country they left. And they've got to change the country they moved to the country they left. It makes no sense. This is just ramblings of people who are mad. Let's see. Yeah, the Bane. This thing about a voting bloc. Here in Australia, that voting bloc actually was not very successful. They tried. They tried, especially with the Greens and Independents. But I think part of the reason that they actually failed is also not necessarily because people didn't really vote for those candidates. It's because Labor actually, the Labor Party actually learned a lot of lessons from the UK, where, guess what? And this is one of my favorite statistics of all time. The Gaza Independents got their 4 or 5 seats with lesser votes than Reform UK got in their last election. And I think Reform got like 14 million votes or something like that. How crazy is that? Yeah, anyways. So the Labor Party in Australia saw what happened to the Labor Party in the United Kingdom, and they figured, okay, we cannot allow independents and the people who have aligned themselves with the Greens to actually to win seats away from us. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to nominate the same. We're going to nominate those people within our own party. And that worked brilliantly because it took the votes away from those independents and the Greens and actually collapsed the Greens vote. But Labor won quite a number. They have essentially a super majority at the moment. And it was a brilliant strategy. I can show you, what was his name? Bassem Abdo. I believe he's... Oh, maybe he's not that popular on X. But on Google... Oh, I was spelling his name wrong. That's fine. Yeah, this gentleman here, this fine gentleman here, he's Australia's first elected Palestinian MP. And that's essentially how they did it. Arnold, where should I start on researching the Quran and Hadith? Because I know a lot of translations try to make things... there's a book. That's a great question, actually. Great question. And you are absolutely spot on. If you didn't know, all the modern translations and the ones you actually find online are getting sanitized at light speed. Now, I'm not going to say that's entirely a bad thing. You know why? Because in my most popular video that you'll probably have seen about Islam not surviving the 21st century, I did say, yes, the cat lady, thank you very much. Robert Spencer did the critical Quran, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, the critical Quran. Arnold, you want to pick up a copy of this? It's probably one of the few that you can actually read on the topic that it's where it's not sanitized as well. At the moment, if you go and read a lot of these translations, they won't have the accurate translations. They'll have something that is much more modernized and perhaps much more acceptable in the modern day. So that's exactly what I would recommend to to do. And I believe Robert Spencer is actually the person who does the live counter for terrorist groups or terror attacks in these countries. So check that out. It's a fantastic book. And Friendly Ghost is Sam Shamone. Is that who I think it is that you're talking about? Yeah, okay. I understand. Yep, correct. This is also a great suggestion. I would highly recommend you actually listen to him as well. This gentleman is actually a Christian, and he talks a lot about Islam, especially from the Quran and the Hadith. So, yeah, check that out if you want to learn more about it. But look, I always say to everybody, there's this propaganda line used by a lot of Muslim apologists talking about how, just read the Quran and you'll convert immediately to Islam. It's not true. The first time I actually read it, I left the religion. So I always say, look, it's a really boring book. It's relatively violent, and I believe in English it is not very exciting. You should absolutely try to give it a shot. Perhaps in a future live stream, what we can do is I'll just go through the Quran with everybody. Just read through the translations. Hopefully that'll be a fun exercise. But the only problem is, I just find the book really boring. It's just mainly nonsense. That's probably why I probably would fall asleep doing a live stream like that. But yeah, definitely go check it out. That's where I recommend you start. So Bassem Abdo, yeah, he's the Palestinian MP who was elected, and it was, yeah, here we go. First Palestinian Australian federal MP selected by Labor, and that strategy really worked. Let's have a look. The cat lady. Actually, I just saw your comment that says finally catch a live of you. Look, I've only done 5 of these. This being the 5th one, so you haven't missed too many. But as I always say, I will try to do a lot more. In fact, my goal is to be able to do one every week, especially on Sundays. And I think actually nighttime's better for everybody. I seem to have a few more viewers watching concurrently than when I do it in the morning. So perhaps I will switch it up to be at night. I was speaking to Drew Pavlo, who's you might have seen him on Twitter. I was actually trying to do a video with him where we talk about Islam, because he's one of those Australians, I believe, who's extremely active on X. Everyone knows who he is, but with him, I think he's only now sort of really started talking about Islam quite a bit, and I think a lot of people's actually their eyes got opened on October the 7th, and it's never really been the same since. And I think a lot of people have since started talking about it. So hopefully it stays that way, and hopefully I will be able to do that with him. Harry Sultan, I will. He followed me recently. Actually, I have not reached out to him, but maybe we can do something together. He was someone I used to follow ages ago, before I even started on YouTube. Bella Umbrella, great to have you here. One of my very dedicated supporters. It's thank you very much for all your support. Really happy to have you here. And Tufe King, no, not at all. I honestly do this still as a part-time project, but the goal is for me to, and that's part of the reason why I feel like I still have to wear this mask, because the stuff that I talk about isn't too palatable for people just yet, but hopefully in the future that will be the case. And as I say, you know what, if you want to accelerate towards that and support my work more, please check out my Patreon. It's not very much, and you get access to a lot more, especially early access to videos and uncensored version of videos. YouTube, unfortunately, has actually had a problem recently too. I believe in August, they seem to have done something to the algorithm, which has impacted a lot of bigger YouTubers. Look, I don't see myself as a big YouTuber still, but it's impacted me as well, and things aren't getting distributed as much to everybody. I don't actually think all my subscribers even see a lot of my videos anymore, so hopefully it's a hurdle to get over. Okay, I actually had a different subject that I wanted to cover real quick as the last one. And this, I am reading your comments, by the way. So if you did have any questions, just put them in there. I'll try to get to them as soon as possible. The toucher, I think you talked about Greta Thunberg. Yes, when oh, thank you very much, David Baker. Welcome. Go check out my Patreon. I'll actually start putting in a lot more written articles in there as well. Those will actually be completely free for everybody to read. Thank you very much for that. I always appreciate people signing up to Patreon. Yeah, Matthew Byrne, that is correct. Because unfortunately, YouTube is always changing things up. And it's completely out of your control. And all I can do, my idea behind my channel, and I guess I don't really speak about what the specifics of what I do with my channel, but my idea behind the channel has always been, regardless of algorithm changes or whatever you can see, I'll just try to put out the best content I can, speaking truly without holding back, essentially, because I know a lot of the stuff that I talk about have really high stakes. And growing up, I know exactly what a voice like mine would have done for me as a kid, and I think that is my goal. So regardless of what it is, I'll keep on doing that. So once again, thanks everyone for your support. Now, let's have a look at this lady here. I'm not sure if you have seen this news, but this is Shabana Mahmood, who has now been selected as the new UK Home Secretary. And this has caused quite the uproar on social media. Now, she's a Pakistani Muslim. She's extremely engaged with the Palestine movement. She has actually attended Palestine protests that were calling for globalizing the Intifada. Now, obviously, you might know what the Intifada might look like, and that kind of speaks to what a lot of these people actually think. As you may already know, I love moments like that where people, the mask they wear slip and they reveal who they really are. Now, her being selected the Home Secretary, if take away everything, okay? Take away her religious ideas, whatever. She's an experienced politician. She's a lawyer. But there is a problem. And that problem is the UK's Home Office is actually pretty compromised. I did a video specifically on this where let me tell you the story again. So a Christian woman, her country of origin was never revealed in the legal documents, but I somewhat put two and two together based on her characteristics, and I figured, okay, she's a Christian woman, here's some of the stuff she said. She's almost certainly from Pakistan, where Miss or Mrs. Shabana Mahmood is from. She applied for asylum in the UK because she was getting persecuted by Muslims in Pakistan. And guess what happened? They looked at all her documents and said, this is nonsense. This is all fake, and we're going to reject it. So lawyers came in, lawyers got involved. Turns out there was a network built within the UK's Home Office that consisted of something like 1,000-strong Muslim network. And they were influencing these asylum and immigration decisions. Now, you can see a lot of these Pakistanis Muslim Pakistanis seeking asylum in the UK. All these people, no problem. Come on right in. But a Christian woman getting persecuted back there? Nope. All fake. Because you might have seen these comments even on my channel where people are like, no, you are not an ex-Muslim. That's completely fake. Because to a lot of them, living in that denial, it kind of keeps that story going where a religion like Islam is so perfect where nobody actually could even consider leaving it. So, actually, this is really funny. Tommy Robinson shared something about her. Where in her first full day in office, over 1,000 illegal immigrants are chaperoned into the UK by those paid to protect Britain's borders. All unvetted, of course. Unvetted everywhere. I can't think of... Not even in Australia are these people usually vetted. And will be housed, taken to hostels across the country, all paid for by the taxpayer. I believe the United Kingdom spends around £7 million a day on housing these people. And the other day I did see very nice townhouses with EV charging ports being provided to these people. And obviously there is a major housing issue in the United Kingdom at the moment. But these people, by virtue of hopping on a boat and crossing the channel, will be provided housing, a brand new mobile phone, everything paid for by you, the taxpayer, on arrival. So sometimes I wouldn't imagine it's very motivating to actually work full time, 365 days a year. And here's another fact. She actually swore her oath on the Quran, and that's what I want to get to. Where is it where she says, oh, here we go. Listen to this.
Islam, my own religion, like a lot of practicing Muslims, my faith is the most important thing in my life. It is the absolute driver of everything that I do. I feel a very strong calling of my own conscience, and my conscience calls me to God. That is how Islam...
What does that even mean, honestly? The absolute driver of everything that I do. Is that why Lobo Odinson, is that why she stopped an SA offender from getting deported? I don't understand what she means by that. Like, I simply cannot imagine it being a driver of everything she does, not conflicting with the role that she is in at the moment, for example. Because, as I said, that example of the persecuted Christian woman, if Islam is the absolute driver of everything you do, that woman's getting sent right back. She's not getting granted asylum whatsoever unless they get sued again. And what about other things like with being in the Home Office, border protections, for example? Say you don't actually... Yeah, Kurt, I have actually said this to many people. I reckon we will have to take in British asylum seekers in the next few years. And look, it's not a bad thing. Honestly, just try to skew the numbers a little bit. As long as you don't come in and vote Labour. That's the only condition. Yeah, but let's go back to that. I do find that statement to be extremely problematic, especially considering what her position now is. Islam cannot be the absolute driver of everything you do, especially when you're in charge of borders, national security, public safety, counter-terrorism. There is a massive problem in a lot of Western nations at the moment where counter-terrorism units or ideas are getting influenced by the more woke, politically correct versions of it, where people are like, oh, you shouldn't perhaps think of Islam, for example, having issues that might cause people to do bad things, especially when it comes to counterterrorism. So you're getting asked to effectively not look into, say, people who follow that religion a little bit too close, because guess what? You might be considered Islamophobic. And I bet if a person like this is now in charge, that is exactly what's going to happen. It's extremely scary. And we already know that in the UK there is a two-tier justice system, especially when it comes to policing. So is that now going to be just supercharged because of her? So say, for example, we looked at Graham Linehan before. Say you criticize Islam. The person who commented before about reading the Quran. Say you go and read Robert Spencer's The Critical Quran, and you'd say you lived in the UK and you decided to post about it. Will you now be at a higher risk of getting arrested because she's in charge of the police? That is the danger. If Islam, again, is the absolute driver of everything you do, guess what? She's going to go after you. So yeah, that's a big problem, and I think, to be honest, it's a major conflict of interest actually. Where's this? Oh yeah, here's another one. It's incredible that this person is the Home Secretary, and this is what she has to say.
You know, the people that you see holding the English flag most of the time, down my neck of the woods, will be the EDL, and they are white, and they are male, and they're bad people, and they want to divide our communities from one another. You know, the people that you...
Is that right? How does someone think of something like this? I did actually say to people when the Raise the Flag campaign started, I did say, if raising the English flag or painting it on zebra crossings and roundabouts, if that is seen as an act of resistance, then unfortunately that implies that your country is actually occupied at the moment by a foreign force. Does it not? Oh, thank you very much, Edessa. You are an absolute legend, my friend. Thank you very much. That is, to me, that is the case. And here she is saying, you can call it many things, cat lady. That's what I've always called them. But yeah, like, how exactly is raising the English flag immediately associated with EDL? I actually don't know when this video was made. It might be a little bit older. But you can see how that caused so much controversy, especially recently. Because people almost immediately associated that with nationalism, and we did speak about nationalism a little bit, a bunch before, where that's sort of fallen out of favor in the mainstream, where that's seen as a bad thing, because ultimately I really do feel like a conspiracy theorist when I say the globalist agenda, but how else am I going to describe it? It is part of the whole globalist agenda that they sort of get rid of the idea of a nation state. And I guess that is part of why with the whole Raise the Flag campaign, that was seen as so controversial, such a bad thing to see the English flags everywhere. Just take it down, because if you, as someone living in England, put up the English flag, guess what? You are a fascist, ladies and gentlemen. So I think you have to consider, even if this was 10 years ago, obviously this person is once again falls within the ranks of people like Zohran Mamdani or Omar Fateh in the US, where they're combining these left-wing ideas with Islamism. So you've got this really weird ideology that actually doesn't make a lot of sense, but works really effectively when it comes to essentially gain as much power as possible. Because on the one hand, you have an idea that wants to dominate the rest, and the other, the left-wing ideas, they control institutions. It's the perfect match, a match made in heaven. And now that she is the Home Secretary, unfortunately in the UK, I feel like they're in big trouble. And I have thought about the UK a lot recently, and I am genuinely struggling to figure out a way out for them, because it's horrible what's happened to that country. I mean, I feel like every time I do a live stream, there's one or two stories that you could almost think they were AI generated. I mean, the last live stream I did in the UK, that was about Islamic blasphemy laws coming in, and we started today with someone getting arrested for tweets at the airport by heavily armed police, and now you have this. And I think that is why it just became such a bad optics issue. Because when I started off with this, I did say, take away everything, she's a lawyer, she has experience, that's fine. So a person like that can get elected or selected into as the Home Secretary. But the optics here are so bad, especially when you look at what she's said in the past about things like the English flag, or the fact that Islam is the absolute driver behind everything she does. How can someone listen to this stuff and think she's going to be objectively doing things in favor of everyone? Clearly not. And especially when it comes to asylum, borders, and policing, there are already issues that's essentially pushed the UK towards an almost civil war in the future, because people have lost all confidence in being able to change this through voting. And I do think reform has a great chance in the next election, but in this case, the optics are horrendous. And look, the Raven King, another thing is also, and I think people neglect this bit a lot, obviously there's a lot of corruption and negligence, but there's also a lot of money to be made. And I think that's part of what actually drives issues like this. Have a look at this. Like, the optics, once again, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Like, someone looks at this, and I believe I shared something from Sydney Watson up here somewhere. Where is it? Oh, look at this. I'm getting so radicalized by this. It is true. Once you see something like this, it just radicalizes. I feel like someone who's not politically engaged, it would radicalize you. You would just go insane over it. And here's Andrew Gold, and he's saying, imagine a Hasidic Jew being named Home Secretary. It's unimaginable. It would be insane. Correct. I think today, if a Jewish person was in fact selected or named as the Home Secretary, I feel like towns in the UK are going to get burned, because there will be that much pushback. And he is correct here. Islam is 1,000 times more extreme and threatening to the UK. And yet, guess what? People did not listen to what Christopher Hitchens was saying almost 20 years ago, and this is where we're at the moment. Unfortunately, the only way out of this at the moment peacefully is probably by electing reform. And I think they have a really, really great chance. Who knows what they'll be able to actually do once they're in power, because these things aren't as easy to do, but hopefully all you can do is hope for the best. All right, let's have a look at some of your comments. Again, X radicalized me into becoming a Catholic. Natasha, look, I agree. I've seen some of these Catholic edits as well, and it's hard not to see them and think, man, this is actually some real cool shit. But then again, it didn't convert me. I still remain an agnostic. But guess what? I did really enjoy my time when I was at the Vatican, seeing everything there. I mean, obviously there's a certain religious aspect to it, but I also saw what was effectively a human story, how they were able to build these things, these monuments, and how strong their beliefs were to have been driven into creating all of that. It was fantastic. That visit there. I recommend everyone to visit the Vatican if you get the chance ever. The other thing I would definitely love to do is also go to Jerusalem and check out the history behind a lot of the Abrahamic religions there. That I think would be really fun too. The cat lady is saying she's hoping to see many Jews coming to live here in Israel. Good, talented people. Yeah, I mean, I have actually spoken to a number of Jews living in Australia who've said to me that they never ever thought they would consider moving to Israel because a lot of them were born in Australia and they've never seen any other country as a place to have to run away to because Australia has always been it's been a great country for, I would say, the majority of people. It's an egalitarian nation generally. It's a safe country for and overall it is a multicultural country, at least in the past. Quid Padler just subscribed. Thanks, Quid Padler. Thank you very much for your support. Yeah, and unfortunately, these people are having to consider going to Israel. That's crazy to me. Not really a future that I thought I would see here in Australia. Let's see. Just reading some of your comments and some of your questions. Yeah, I can't keep them quiet. Something funny about my dogs. Fun fact: in Islam, black dogs are considered the worst type of dogs. I don't know if you know this. I think they're considered the devil, and that sort of plays into why I specifically got this mask as well. There's more meaning behind that, but yeah, I've got black dogs. I've got Rottweilers, and they're very protective. But yeah, and the good thing is, yeah, the messaging was there. I think that was one of my biggest rebellious, the most rebellious thing I've done in regards to apostasy is to get black dogs. Yeah, they're not just haram. They are considered demons or devils. And there is actually a funny story about dogs here as well. Dogs were considered... So initially they weren't banned in Islam, but when Muhammad was first spreading his message, he was asked a number of questions by the Jews in Mecca. So the Jews were his biggest issue, even back then. Well, you can now see why he hated them so much. But he asked them some questions, I believe, and he couldn't immediately answer them. So they were testing whether his prophethood was actually real. And he said he couldn't immediately answer those questions because Gabriel, the archangel, would not enter his house because there was a puppy sleeping under his bed or something like that. Oh, there was a puppy in his house that was scaring this archangel. So, so from that point onwards, dogs sort of fell out of favor by with Islam. I think you can still keep dogs as herding or shepherding dogs or protection dogs, but black dogs, still no. I believe a number of Muslims in Mecca actually tried to negotiate this, and they finally came back to the point of, we're just going to have to ban all. We're not going to kill all of them, but black dogs, definitely, it's a big no to them. Yeah, Friendly Ghost. I was actually just about to say that. I was about to say maybe part of the reason is dogs have really great intuition. Maybe they just figured, maybe I should not... thank you very much, Nathan Williams. It's great to have you on board. Hop on Patreon. There's a lot there. If you actually join the Discord as a patron, you also get access to a patrons only channel. So hopefully, if you just want to have a chat or something like that, feel free to go in and check it out. What's his issue with pork then? I actually genuinely think it was more a hygiene thing. I genuinely think so. I don't necessarily believe. Yeah, and obviously there was a lot that was actually borrowed from Judaism and even Christianity to an extent, but he did mess up a lot of things. Like I think the person who asked me about the Quran, I don't know if he's still watching, but there was something like he messes up the names Mariam and Miriam, two different people. Oh, sorry, Mary and Miriam. Two very different people. So there are things like that he really screwed up on, because I guess by trying to bring together all the religions, even the pagan ones, he was essentially going for that big tent strategy where it's much easier for a lot of people to accept this new religion if not too much really changes. But it really picked up. Yeah, Tranquil Vortex, you're absolutely correct. It is really quite funny, and I guess the way it evolved was it actually didn't really pick up that much steam until, and you asked this you asked this question to Muslims, so they're probably going to deny this, but it didn't really actually pick up steam until he started offering sex slaves as war booty to his soldiers. That was the key. Once he started doing that, Islam grew very rapidly. And in his final years, he was absolutely consumed by war and sex, effectively. And there was someone who made a really, really funny joke, and I'll actually type that into the chat. You know how they always type in the SAW after his name? They're saying the SAW actually stands for sex and war, which I found to be quite funny. And the day I read that, I've not been able to see it any other way. Raymond Ibrahim. No, I've not heard of him. Maybe I'll check him out. There are so many people who have developed this interest around Islam recently. I think post October 7, that's probably the turning point. So there's a lot of people. In my case, I guess what happens is actually, let me see. Yeah, I guess in my case, because I wasn't really showing you guys anything on the screen. Now you get to see me in HD. Yeah, I guess with me the problem is, look, I was born into the religion, so there was a lot of trauma and struggle there around leaving it, and obviously I didn't leave it immediately. There was a lot of debate, lots going on, so I feel like I'm at a point where there's not much left to learn. I like to look at Islam more around the historical side of it now, or these days. I don't really like to debate Muslims anymore either, especially on whether Islam is true or not. Like, I always find it devolves into, I don't know who said this, but it's something. It's something like if you're trying to argue with an idiot from a distance, it looks like two idiots are arguing. So I do remember that. Like, I don't know how much I can say to disprove to someone that a human being flew on a winged donkey to Jerusalem and back, and or to the seven heavens and met God and Moses and Jesus. Like, what kind of debate is that? Like, those aren't the type of conversations I want to have anymore these days, especially. I wanted the type of conversation I would prefer to have, conversely, about how women are treated today, or how Christians and Jewish minorities are treated today. That's what I'm more interested in, and I would talk about that easily. But the rest, like the theological bit, no, thank you. I've done my part when I was a kid in my teenage years. No longer. All right, let's have a look at a few more of your questions. I love that comment, honestly, scrolling up about Australia having to start taking British asylum seekers. Honestly, I see that happening, and I have actually advocated for, if Britain doesn't get turned around, for them to have to give up their nuclear weapons, because there's a chance that they might become a hostile nation. Let's see. I mean, we can have a look through the Hadith, Bella. But the problem is, like, historical evidence also, I mean, you're effectively relying on the Hadith being accurate, aren't you? Because there aren't other sources that could probably verify these things. For example, his marriage to Aisha, for example, and the issue around her age, that comes from the Hadith itself. I don't believe there are any other real sources around that. And when I was growing up, it was never a point that was argued. Like, it was accepted as fact that he married Aisha when she was 6 years old. Like, none of my Islamic teachers ever argued that she was 18 years old or something else, because they trusted the more sahih hadith, as you call it, or the more authentic versions. Thank you very much, Cat Lady. Just looking to see if I haven't answered any of your questions. If you did have any, just put them in the comments. I'll do a quick Q&A section before we actually wrap it up, as I've hit the nice 2 hours. He was in his late, I believe he was 53 or 54. And he didn't actually live very long. He only lived up to his 60s. And here's another fact that they won't tell you. He was actually killed by a Jewish woman. He was poisoned by a Jewish woman whom they had conquered. I believe she served up poisoned goat or lamb, something like that. Yeah, and then he just never recovered from it. His bride Aisha actually has said many times that she would hear him like screaming in pain. Yeah, that was the first Mossad agent. The Cat Lady, I am getting, it really tires me out that I always get accused of being either a CIA agent or a Mossad agent. Like from the start, I've been accused of working for some agency. I mean, I wish I was that cool. Yeah, And that lady, and I recall reading these hadiths where Aisha actually reports something like, let me see if I can bring it up. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Let me switch back to live. Here we go. Cat Lady, I use Premiere Pro. Yeah. So Aisha goes something like, in his ailment in which he died, he used to say, I still feel the pain caused by the food I ate at Kaiba. And at this time, yeah, check it out. It was pretty bad. And I believe he tried, God, what is that treatment where you have these glass bulbs or whatever, and you put a little flame under it. I can't recall. It's part of Chinese medicine as well, and you just plop them on your back, and it sort of sucks in your skin, and you feel really good after it. A lot of fighters, a lot of people like who at the gym and use that for recovery. Cupping, yes, sorry, completely forgot. Yeah, he tried to use cupping to try and treat that. Here we go. Yeah, after the conquest of Kaiba, and you might make the connection because in a lot of these pro-Palestine protests, they always talk about Kaiba, and they go, Kaiba, ya Yahud, something like the soldiers or the armies of Islam are coming for you, Jews. They use that a lot. Yeah, so this is the woman who essentially killed him. Zainab bint al-Harith, yeah, presented him with a poisoned roasted sheep. Apparently they tasted it, but the Prophet recognized it as poisoned, refrained from consuming more, but one of his companions later died from it. And years after, he spoke about how that still impacted him, and I believe that was the primary reason why his life got cut short, because of that poison. So the more you look into this history, the more you realize where this hatred and why this hatred still lives on in the modern world. And unfortunately, as long as this religious dogma lives on, it's not something that I believe will ever be rid of. Yeah, let's have a look. Well, Raymond King, I guess a lot of these people were so, at that point in time, they were just winning war after war. No one could stop them. They were on a roll. So I guess they probably didn't expect somebody to be that bold in doing something like that, especially knowing what sort of fate would await you if you tried something like that. And that Zainab did die shortly after. They executed her for doing that. So it's something that, yeah, correct, friendly ghost. And I guess the other thing is also you have to remember that the vast majority of Muslims do not actually understand Arabic, and the Quran and Hadith are all written in Arabic. So you are effectively relying on a translation to know what these words actually mean. And a lot of the time that's actually not required, because you are taught to actually read Arabic and how it actually sounds without actually knowing what the words really mean. So in that case, so the way it works is by learning that, you can pray, you can read the Quran, and that's all that's really required to practice Islam. Especially if you are from an Islamic country. So you never really are exposed to what it actually says. And say you're a little bit older and everything is connected to Islam, your community, your family, laws, everything. So if you do by chance read the translations and realize, wait a minute, a lot of this is BS, it's then really hard for someone to leave the religion, unfortunately. Cat Lady, thank you very much for the donation. Now you are paid by Zionists. God, someone's got to use that against me forever. What is that symbol? Like, is that... yeah, it must be because it hasn't automatically become Australian dollars, I think. Shekels. I don't think I've ever seen that symbol before. It's pretty cool, actually. Israel money, yeah. And is that the actual symbol, or that YouTube's displaying here, or is that something else? And correct, Tupe King. The other thing is he you might have noticed when he was in Mecca, he actually didn't marry another woman apart from his first wife. And that is because his first wife, they always hear this thing about, oh, Islam gave women so many rights, but his first wife was a very successful businesswoman who was independently doing business. So that immediately generally disproves that claim. Yeah, he never married somebody else because he was essentially living off her, and even though he did preach his religion, nobody really cared to convert, and nothing really did pick up steam until he moved to Medina. But once he did, and after she died, that's when he started marrying people. The religion suddenly exploded, and he was able to do things like war booty, and that really spread the religion. All right, well, I think we've hit a nice 2 hours and 11 minutes. I hope it's been an enjoyable session for everybody. Look, I will try my hardest to do these, and I think this time of night on Sundays is actually pretty easy. So hopefully I'll be able to do this every Sunday. And I think we covered a few really cool topics today that if people weren't able to tune in, or if you wanted to see it again, I will just clip those and I will pop them in as videos on the main channel. Thank you very much. Look, I see a number of people here like you, Bella, that I don't think I've seen. Or Cat Lady and the Toucher. I don't think I've actually seen you guys in a live stream before, but I always see your comments. I do read all your comments, and a few of you engage with me on Patreon and such. So it's actually been really fun, really great to actually be able to speak to you on a live stream like this. So hopefully we'll be able to do it a lot more. And feel free to please send through any videos, anything you'd like me to comment on, either on X, just tag me, drop them in Discord, and if you're on Patreon, just message me on there as well, and I'll be more than happy to add them into the next live stream. It has been very fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Kurt, thank you very much. Finishing off on a on that donation. Thank you very much for your support. Thanks for watching for 2 hours. It's been absolutely fantastic. And if you haven't seen the latest videos, go check it out. I do appreciate you all quite a lot. It's been great. We'll do this next Sunday as well. Thank you very much, all. We'll end with that.